Hi, I'm Denshi, and recently there's been these huge advancements in computing. So, the new NVIDIA GPUs, the 7nm AMD chips, super ultra-fast SSDs in PlayStation 5 for game data streaming, for, all these super impressive graphics and stuff. But if I had to mention two of the biggest changes that have happened in the computing world that will have the biggest impact, it's gotta be ARM processors and Windows 10X. Now, a lot of people have been discussing the first one because Apple announced Apple Silicon, their initiative to create ARM chips for their devices. And you can probably correct me on this, but this is the first time I've seen a company pursue putting an ARM chip into an average desktop computer. Like, not laptops, but actual desktop computers that sit on your desk, so there's gonna be iMacs with ARM processors. But that's nothing new. They made that announcement a while back and it's sort of old news now. But the reason I want to talk about ARM processors is how it ties into Windows 10X. If you purposefully install Windows on a computer, it's because you need to run Windows-only software. And keep that in mind, because Microsoft just decided to break that. Well, not really just. It all really starts with Windows 8's release. Windows 8 is infamous for the Metro UI and the start menu making no sense and everybody hating it. It was criticized for trying to make Windows more accessible to tablet users, but that was sort of the point, at least from a CPU architectural perspective, because Windows 8 was the first Windows version to have a native ARM version. But the thing is, Windows programs are compiled for x86. How can you get Windows to run on ARM? What's the point of porting the operating system if none of the actual programs, so the reason many people use Windows, are going to be compatible? And of course, we all know Microsoft's solution to this was Windows apps. The UWP apps, Universal Windows Platform apps, essentially made to unify Windows, even with Xbox. The universal in UWP is basically pointless because Windows Phone isn't really, a thing anymore, which also explains why many mobile games are on the Microsoft Store. But anyway, Microsoft's implementation of the ARM Windows was genuinely horrifying. I knew someone who used an ARM-based laptop that ran Windows 8 for ARM devices, and he described the entire experience as painful. But eventually the Microsoft Store and the UWP format was at least kinda improved for Windows 10, and by that I mean people actually use it, mostly because they have to. But my point is, we all know Microsoft has been pursuing ARM computing for quite a while, but there's something a little bit more nefarious here. We all know Microsoft with their good old patented anti-consumer business practices. You see, the UWP programs can only be installed from the Microsoft Store. That means they control literally everything on there and all the software available for Windows. And this all brings us to Windows 10X and ARM CPUs. I've already made a video where I take a look at Windows 10X, but that's basically only judging the UI. But Windows 10X has some of the biggest changes to Windows ever. So first of all, as you can easily guess, the recommended way to install apps in Windows 10X is via the Microsoft Store. But unlike Windows 10, which at least is natively compatible with regular Windows programs, Windows 10X runs them in a container. It doesn't throw out the functionality straight out of the window, but it's likely that newer versions of Windows 10X will strip it out. Developers will have to use UWP and Microsoft's Store. Just for comparison, Apple's Mac OS, one of the strictest and just pointlessly restricting operating systems that I've ever used, at least lets you install programs from unknown sources if you ask nicely. Windows 10X lets you do this, but it's in a container, sandboxed, and it's not recommended, and it most likely will be removed in the future. That's just my theory, because nobody's really gonna write Windows programs for Windows 10X and not have them on the Microsoft Store. So eventually the functionality will just be phased out simply because it won't be needed anymore. But not only is software availability and software installs themselves getting completely changed in Windows 10X, but I haven't seen any evidence that Windows 10X will run on x86 chips. I know it's meant for foldable devices and, lightweight laptops, which most likely will have ARM chips, but Microsoft, like Apple, is completely hammering down that Windows and just computing's future in general is ARM. And just giving my personal opinion, I don't really have a problem with ARM chips if they keep getting better and developing developers focus on, programs that work on ARM, then most likely we'll see better performance and better battery saving. Except that will be useless on a desktop, and the ARM chips will probably have even worse spyware than what the Intel chips currently have. And that brings me to what I'm really worried about when it comes to the future of computing. Personal computers are becoming more and more like smartphones. Think about it. The strictly controlled ecosystem in app stores, the ARM chips, it's all just generally becoming like smartphones. People love to argue how transitioning to ARM will have this weird changeover period where people will be using x86 programs and ARM programs, and companies will have to release 2 versions of each program like they did when Apple was switching from IBM PowerPC to the Intel chips. But that's nothing compared to the genuine paradigm shift that's happening right before our eyes. It's not really a problem with ARM chips directly, but the fact that they're a completely different architecture and, developers have to make new programs for them will make it more and more convenient for developers to release their programs on something like the Microsoft Store, which leads to a more locked down system where a company like Microsoft, the creators of the operating system, have complete control over everything. Say what you want about Windows 10, it's spyware, it's bloated or whatever. I don't personally run it, but at least I can say software compatibility and software accessibility is really, really good. But since the inception of the Microsoft Store and Universal Windows apps, this sort of fear has been lingering in me. Microsoft will not only have complete control over your operating system and even some of the programs that you use on it, but all the programs that you use on it. Say that it performs better, it's more streamlined or more secure or whatever. To me, it's just another attempt to get more spyware and control over people's computers. Windows 10X and the transition to ARM is simply that. Now don't be alarmed, x86 chips will still continue to last for quite a long time, and sure, chances are you'll probably have to switch to ARM, but hopefully there'll be like a good Linux solution for everything, or not. That's the great thing about the future, you can never predict it. So anyway, I just wanted to share this little thought because I was thinking about the Adobe Creative Suite and how Adobe will have to start publishing everything on the Microsoft Store once Windows 10X comes out. And that thought sort of snowballed into this entire video about how, Microsoft is attempting to switch everyone over to this new operating system that only runs on ARM chips and is most likely going to be much more restrictive than Windows 10. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. Goodbye.